the single cheapest gaming PC I've ever put together. Oh! And we have actual RGB fans. 100 frames a second from a PC of this level. That is outstanding. It's time for the Budget Gaming PC 2021. The video I know so many of you guys have been waiting for, and I think this is actually going to be the single cheapest gaming PC I've ever put together. And I know what you're thinking, that doesn't actually sound that impressive. Is this going to be rubbish? Absolutely not. This is still going to be fantastic for Fortnite, Apex Legends, Warzone, everything multiplayer really. We're aiming this at the PC that can do it all, but doesn't really cost very much. So yes, I'm extremely excited about this one. As always, we're going to show you how to put everything together, the full step-by-step build process, everything that's good about it, everything that's not. But first, I believe there's a short word from our sponsor. What happened to time? I remember having a lot of it. But these days I seem to spend all of my mornings standing up in a tiny kitchen eating cereal. Thankfully, catching up on the daily news is now really enjoyable, informative, and most importantly, quick. All thanks to Morning Brew, the sponsor of today's video. Morning Brew is a witty, relevant, and informative newsletter that's available Monday to Saturday, and it only takes 5 minutes to get up to date. Using Morning Brew, I've learned a lot about shorting and the stock market, just how much some of the top footballers can make in a year, and those all-important updates on the global health situation. There's no reason not to subscribe to Morning Brew if you're interested in business, finance, or tech. It is completely free and takes less than 15 seconds to subscribe. Hit the link in the description below today to subscribe to Morning Brew. Awesome, we've got all of our parts here together, but as always, we're going to get rid of all of those and walk you through everything step by step as we go along. The first step really with any gaming PC build is to actually grab the motherboard from outside of the box, which is quite difficult to do one-handed, and then talk to the audience about it. This is the B460 Tomahawk from MSI, and a B460 motherboard is essentially very similar really to a Z490 motherboard, but it's a whole lot cheaper and it doesn't allow for overclocking, and your RAM speed is going to be a little bit limited. But at this price point, I don't think that's really going to make any difference to performance whatsoever. We've still got loads of features, and MSI is of course a very reputable brand. It should be very well made. We've got USB-C on the back as well, which is a nice thing. We've got loads of audio support. There is no Wi-Fi, so we will be using a separate adapter. But I'd say that if you're dead set on Wi-Fi straight from the off, then maybe look at getting a more expensive motherboard that actually has it built in, just because it's a little bit cleaner and can save you a little bit of money. To get started, just plop your motherboard down on the box nice and gently, and then grab your processor or the CPU. And the one that we're using here is definitely a lower end chip. This is the i3-10100, but I would highly advise that you go for a slightly different one, the 10100F, because the chip itself is exactly the same, but it doesn't actually have the integrated GPU inside. But we're not going to be using that either way, and this is going to save you an extra £20–30 based on the version that we have here. And again, performance should be exactly the same. This is a quad-core chip. It's not the fastest thing, but for gaming it's going to be fine at this level, to be honest with you, and it will save yourself even more money. Just open up this little lever nice and gently so that the socket then becomes exposed. Be careful not to touch those pins. Then grab your CPU out of the container, line up this little gold arrow with this sort of like white ball that you find on this motherboard, and just drop it down with no force so that it doesn't move, and then you can secure it just by lowering this socket lever back down. The beauty of the i3 though is that it is fully upgradable. You could whack in even an i7 or i9 if you really wanted to. The only thing you'd have to worry about is the fact that the RAM speeds on this is going to be limited to 2666, unless I think you go for a i7 or an i9, doesn't really matter. The RAM that we're using here is the Vengeance LPX because it's very cheap. And before you call it out, because I know some of you have probably already seen this, this is a 4600 megahertz kit. Definitely do not buy this one. This is just the one that I have on hand, I promise. But in terms of the difference it's going to make to the board, there isn't going to be one because you can't enable this speed anyway. So if you're trying to save money, go for 2666, but maybe look at 3000 megahertz if you want some room for upgradability. Just push these in until they click, and then that is pretty much your motherboard ready for the next step. It looks pretty good, doesn't it? We've got like a black theme but with some silver accents at the moment. Obviously you're not going to see that CPU once we put the cooler on, but I think it's a good looking motherboard, especially bearing in mind the price point. The next step for a lot of people would be to install an M.2 SSD. This goes just in the motherboard here where it says M.2, but to save money we are going for a 240GB BX 500 from Crucial, offers fantastic value for money, but a very strong word of warning, I would not be tempted to go for the 240 gig version. It's around about £10–15 more for double the storage at 500 gig, which is actually going to store all of the games really that you need at any one time, whereas this is just going to have Windows and Call of Duty Warzone, and that would be it. So stay away from this size. But either way, we don't actually need this just yet, because that will need to go in our case because it doesn't fit on the motherboard directly. Unlike this, the cooler, and this is a brand new one actually, it's the Hyper 212 Evo version 2, so it's even better than before. I know it's called the V2, but there have actually been loads of versions of this, so Cooler Master are lying. But the Hyper 212 is an incredibly popular CPU cooler, and for good reason. And that reason really is that it is very inexpensive. It's around about £25 normally, but it gives you much, much better performance than you're going to find from the stock Intel cooler, which you absolutely could use to save yourself some money, whereas something like this is going to just be a lot quieter. You can see it's a lot bigger, it can just displace more heat, and because it's inexpensive, there's not really any real reason not to go for one like this unless you have to save every single penny. To install it, actually remove this fan because you need to put it on a little bit later. Then grab your little box of goodies, and inside you should find an Intel mounting bracket. That's what you're looking for. It looks just like this, and you want to grab these little square screws. You just plop them in to the cooler until they sit in, and then you should have some black plastic clips, and you put these down on top, and then the whole thing feeds through on the back of the motherboard. And this is exactly why you do this on top of the motherboard box, because when you put your little back plate on, nothing then moves around, and you don't have to worry about these screws coming out or anything. Whereas if you try and do this inside the case, you've got to like balance the back plate while screwing things in, and this is a very common noise that you'll hear if you try and do this. Except it's inside your case and you lose them, and it's very frustrating. You get 4 of these tiny little screw riser type things. These just go on top of those posts that you've just poked through. Tra-la-la-la-la. I can't sing any proper songs because of copyright, and it hurts me so much. Grab your little mounting brackets for Intel. These are the straight ones, and then put these on top of the socket. Screw the little Intel plates on top. I think in my illustration of what a screw noise sounds like, I've lost one of the screws that I need. I don't know where it is. This is bad. Where have you gone? I need you. Those aren't the right ones. Sad, Marcus. I found it. I found it. I found it. You will need to apply some thermal paste. This comes inside of the box. If you're using a different cooler, it might come pre-applied if you're getting a little bit confused. The way I like to do it is just to put a little small dab in the middle. Kind of embarrassing, but I think actually that is a little bit too much. I have overdone it. But I'm going to stick with it to prove that it doesn't matter. And to annoy everyone watching. Get your comments in down below. PC Centric is a what? Best insult wins a free PC. Disclaimer, no free PC. Be nice to me, and then maybe you might win one. No free PC. Drop your cooler down then so that it's nice and secure. There are 2 screws. You want nice, even force so that you don't warp the socket, and the thermal paste can be nice and evenly distributed. You can see the whole thing has got a lot more vertical at this stage, but you will need to put your fan on. Make sure it's blowing the right way. You want it to blow through the cooler and out of the case. So we're going to put this on this side. You need to grab this little fan cable, and then you connect it to the header that is just here. And then you have a little bit of cable dangling. You can just tuck this underneath the cooler so that you don't see it. And then with the motherboard out of the way, we can talk about this very cheap, hopefully not a monstrosity. It's called the Ions something. It wasn't really from a brand I've ever heard of before. Certainly not a Corsair or a Be Quiet or anything. But it's pretty bare bones. I mean, there's no, well, there is a basement, but at the same time, there sort of isn't. You can see everything here. It's very cheaply manufactured, but that does not mean that this is going to be bad. The only thing that I'm a bit freaked out about is the fact that on the top, you have a dust filter, and then pretty much no airflow underneath it whatsoever. And I'm not sure if you can remove these. They don't look like it, but why give you a dust filter? I'm not complaining. Oh, I guess I am. Why would you need a dust filter? Bizarre. But don't go worrying about airflow though, because you've got so much air at the front from this mesh intake. The thing to bear in mind is that there aren't any fans that come with this at all, like none. So you're going to have to add your own. So I thought it'd only be fitting, instead of paying £25 for a Corsair fan, to get 3 RGB fans for less money. My brain tells me these are just going to be complete toilet, but let's find out. I've just seen the back. I've just seen the back. And there is no cable management room here at all. You're gonna have to make sure they're all sort of down here or in this little channel, which does look like it's been designed okay. Our SSD seems to go in over here. And the fact that I can lift this up with, I think, my pinky finger tells you everything really you need to know about how heavy and how dense this thing is. Don't sit on it. Oh, let's take a look at these fans though, shall we? They're okay. I mean, they're fans. They do come with little rubber grommets that you can put on as well, so you're not gonna have to worry about like sound isolation or anything like that, or any vibrations. The thing that does worry me is that there is some dust on these. This is clearly a fan that has been used and then returned, which does not inspire confidence. I mean, imagine if they're good. You'd save yourself so much money. Whichever fans you do decide to go for though, it's pretty easy to get them installed. You just use the 4 screws that will come in the box, and then you just mount them at the front of the case or on the rear. I've just noticed that these are not even real RGB fans. It's all powered by this little 4-pin. So if you want to customize it in software with like a ARGB header or something, you can't do it. I imagine this will just cycle through colors and that will be your lot. No remote, no nothing. It's to be expected, but still quite annoying that not all of the standoffs are actually pre-applied in this case. Anywhere where it says A, you need to actually insert another one. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Grab your motherboard nice and gently. It's going to be quite tight, so do be careful. You just push this down so that it sits on top of those little standoffs that you've just made, and screw it down with the screws that are provided with your case. Once you've screwed it in, it really starts to get quite heavy now, and there you have a gaming PC more or less. It looks a bit more serious now, doesn't it? Next up is our SSD, or our solid state drive, and I think there are quite a few different places we can put this actually. It's good that they do give you the option to actually put it inside the basement if you want as well, but to be honest with you, I'd rather not have the cables from the power supply showing up any more than they need to. But as I say, it's good that you get the choice. Grab a SATA cable from your motherboard box, and then this will just plug in at the bottom of your SSD, ready to go into the motherboard. Just feed it back through, and it just connects to one of these little ports up here. Boom! While you're here, you can also plug in some of your case fans. So there's system fan number 6, and then down here we've got system fan number 3, and then this rear fan I've plugged in just next to the CPU cooler itself. Arguably the most confusing or fiddly bit is always the front panel connections right here at the bottom right of the motherboard. They are all quite clearly labeled what they do, but you have to get them in the right order or they just won't work. Do consult your motherboard manufacturer's manual, as it is always clear in there. Next to that you have a USB 3, which is this big black port here, and this big blue cable. And then there's HD audio, which is all the way here at the left hand side. And this one is going to do all of your headset and microphone audio for the front panel. We're certainly getting there. The next step is the power supply. This one is not modular. It is the CV450 from Corsair. And this is pretty much the cheapest I would go for a power supply, really. This one is 450 watts, so there is definitely some upgradability here, but you can't just whack in a RTX 3070 and expect it to work, but you're probably not planning on doing that anyway. I'll give Corsair credit that all of these cables are jet black, so it is going to look pretty good in your PC. Just be aware that because it isn't modular, you've got all of these things you are going to have to put somewhere. The problem is though that you are going to see them, because obviously we've got glass at the bottom. My trousers are also falling down though. Trousers? What are those? I think he means pants. Oh, we don't have that here. Look, I've said it before and I'll say it again. In all of your TV shows, you're like, all right, governor, how's it going? No one speaks like that, so it's about time we return the favour. If you don't like it, hit the subscribe button and like this video. Fan facing downwards, get your power supply and just drop it in the basement. Boo! At this point you might be a little bit intimidated by the amount of cables that you have, but don't worry, there's not actually that many and you can't really get them wrong because most of them all look completely different. This is your 24-pin ATX. This just tucks in to your motherboard, so feed it through at the top. There's a little 8-pin cable that says CPU quite clearly on it, so grab this one and then this will go at the top. There is one cable that does look quite similar. This one will say PCIe on it. This is for our graphics card. There are 2 different cables, but we only need this top bit. So we're going to feed this through at the bottom chamber. And then finally you have this little dangly chain of cables. These are actually the SATA cables, and these are used for maybe RGB fans if you're using the proper ones, hard drives or SSDs like we're using here today. So just grab the end of one of these and then connect that to your SSD, push it in all the way until you're finished, and then you can grab all of these cables. And these are the ones that you probably wouldn't have if you're using a fully modular power supply, but you have these now. So it's your job just to quite nice and neatly tuck these in the back or stuff them. The choice is up to you. And then it's time just to plug those last few cables in really. So we have this CPU at the top here. This absolutely ginormous one that you can't miss needs to be connected up here. But then the most exciting bit for any gamer, the graphics card. And yes, these are going to be quite difficult to find, but that doesn't mean that it can't be done. Get yourself on some waiting lists. The 1650 Super though is a fantastic card if all you want to do is game. You're not too worried about settings, you're playing at 1080p, and you're aiming for around about 60 FPS. Oh, did that look weird? The 1650 Super. You're going to need to remove these little PCIe slot covers. These tear out, you can't reuse them. Line this up with the slot, and then just push it in. It's this top big silver one. Nice, satisfying click. Then it's time to grab that PCIe power cable that you just fed through, plug it into the top, and assuming you weren't using the Wi-Fi card, this would be you done. But we do have a Wi-Fi card. It's the Aorus GCWB-AX200, and it's fast and should be low lag, assuming you have a good router. You're not using the one that your ISP gave you now, surely. Some of them are okay. Most are not. Gently push this in until it clicks again. Screw that down, put this on, and that's it. Complete. The question now becomes, can we close the side panel? And to their credit, they have given you these little like ribbon cables so you can get this bit flat. The best approach is normally just to get your cables in a nicely routed area, push them down somewhere where there's plenty of room, and use a few cable ties to sort of keep them where you want. And then you can grab your side panel. Obviously you don't want to break anything. Oh, we did it! We did it! That was easy! Success! Here we have then our fully completed PC. Does need a little bit of a tidy up of these cables at the basement, but that's not bad, is it? I think that's looking pretty good. Let's grab ourselves a monitor. 1440p is probably a little bit high end for what we've got here today, but we'll give it a go. But does it work? Yes! And we have actual RGB fans. I wasn't expecting that. I thought they were going to look rubbish, but they're okay. They're okay. I'd say overall that's a success. This was meant to be cheap crap case, cheap crap fans. But the joke's on me. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. But anyway, enough talk. There are a couple of things you need to do before we can actually get gaming. The first one is to get a copy of Windows on a USB drive. You just stick this in one of the USB ports, restart the whole thing, and it will actually automatically load into Windows. Just follow the instructions, easy as pie. Then we're going to go into easy mode, find where it says fan info, and just make sure all of these fans are actually set to a lower RPM so that the PC is making a smaller amount of noise really than it does out the box. You can just change these really so that it's at 100% when the CPU hits around about 80 degrees, but then lower it down when it's not. Awesome stuff! Here we are then, our budget gaming PC is ready to go. And not only does it look pretty good, it's not the quietest PC I've ever used, but it's certainly not loud. But the thing for me is that I did a little price up and it actually cost around about £500, which is just incredible when you think you're getting a full-on gaming PC that can play pretty much any modern game. Fuse is here, it's time for some Apex Legends, and I'm putting on the headset because I'm taking this very seriously. It's Apex. And when am I not serious anyway? Are you joking me? This is 1440p because I haven't actually down-resed it yet, and we're getting 75 frames a second from a £500 computer. Really? 1440p? That really is incredible. Look, we're touching down now and we're getting near 100 frames a second from a PC of this level. That is outstanding. Like, I wouldn't really recommend pairing a 1440p display with this particular GPU, but clearly it can handle it. That is very, very impressive. Oh, I'm not gonna make it, I'm not gonna make it. I made it. Turn the resolution down to 1080p though, and you can see we are getting a decent boost to the frame rates. Anywhere really between 120, 140 frames a second. From one battle royale to another, we have some Fortnite. This is running at high settings, 1440p, and this is not the same experience as Apex. I would not really advise playing this at 1440p because we're getting below 60 frames a second. Tuning the resolution down to 1080p though does yield much better results as you'd expect. Not quite as high as Apex Legends, but still 100 frames a second from a budget gaming PC is excellent. It gives you a really nice blend between smoothness from the extra frame rate, but then the visuals at high settings is excellent as well. If you want to play Fortnite and you want to play competitively, then this is going to give you a real fighting chance. Oh, just me and him. Oh no, oh no! No! No, I'm in the storm! I didn't know what a shockwave grenade did. Can't believe I bottled it, man. It's time, I think, for something a little bit less depressing. Civilization 6. This is running pretty nicely, actually. I always load up a save right near the end of the game to properly show you how the frame rate can be, rather than when you start out and there's pretty much nothing in the map. And you can see pretty solid, 60 frames a second, 1440p, ultra settings. But again, this is at 1440p, so if you want to play at 1080, then the frame rate's going to get nearer 80 frames a second or so. Again, right at the end of the game, so this is pretty much the worst case scenario. And then for our final game, we have some Counter-Strike Go, with a load of network statistics and all of that lovely stuff on screen as we plow through some enemies, and we're getting around about 200, 180 frames a second, 1440p max settings. So I don't even need to show you 1080p because it's just going to be insane. Even if you want to grab a 240Hz 1080p monitor, you're really not going to have a trouble driving it whatsoever. This is a gloriously smooth experience. So then, where does all of this leave us? Is this a PC that's worth buying? In all honesty, yeah, absolutely. The thing you've got to remember is that with a budget gaming computer, what you don't want to do is almost save yourself a little bit of money, cheap out now, and then not be able to upgrade later. Whereas this is something that is really capable from the off. The only thing you're not really going to be able to do with this is upgrade to like PCI Generation 4, but there are plenty of options here for future paths. The new graphics cards that will come out later this year should be able to drop straight in. Maybe you want to go for like a next generation processor, upgrade to an i5 from the 11th gen. You can do that. This is a brilliant platform. The case seems to fit it all in nicely. The fans actually aren't too bad. They're not as quiet as I would like, mainly because you can't have them really turned down because then the RGB goes off, because obviously it's all powered by the same thing. But it's not really a big deal. All things considered, this is an excellent little gaming computer, and if you don't want to spend a whole lot of money, or you've just not got a whole lot of money to spend on a gaming computer, then there isn't really anything to compromise on this. If you do want to check out current pricing, then you can with my Amazon affiliate links listed down below. A massive thank you for actually watching this video. I really appreciate it. Do check out some other rigs that I've done that are a little bit more expensive, that have more features. You can find those in the end screen. But do get yourself subscribed for more videos just like this. Let me know down in that comment section what you'd like to see next. But thank you so much for watching. Smash that like button, and I'll see you in the next one.